Hey guys, welcome to Busted Seams. This is my very first full-length video, and as promised, I'm going to cover some of the top fashion myths and misconceptions in our industry. So let's jump right in. Myth number 1. So you have to be able to hand draw. This one is categorically untrue. In my 15 years in the design industry, I have never once been required to hand draw for any job that I've had. The standard is really Adobe Illustrator. So even if you're doing a real nitty-gritty technical sketch where you're making sure all of the construction details are clear, or if you're doing a stylized sketch with a lot of shading and maybe even filling with color or pattern work, Adobe Illustrator is just the standard. Now, some companies do use Corel Draw still. It's just another vector drawing program. So that is another standard out there. And of course, the industry is moving toward 3D eventually. So Clo 3D, Browseware, Tucatex, Gerber 3D, etc. There's a lot of programs out there. But I would argue that even 3D modeling is a step further away from hand illustration because 3D modeling requires that you start with a pattern piece and you drape it onto a 3D avatar model, and then you sort of apply textures to it. So it's just not the same process as creating a 2D hand illustration. It's just you don't go at it the same way. So my advice would be if you are currently in a fashion design program and you are in a hand illustration class or it's part of one of your technical drawing classes, learn what you need to get through the class. It is more than likely something that you will never use at the professional level when you hit the industry. Now, it is a nice to have when I'm, as a hiring manager looking at resumes and portfolios. But even then, I'm like, oh, that's nice. They're talented, but I know they're never going to be able to plug that skill directly into what we're doing at the corporate level in fashion design. So it can be helpful, but no, it is absolutely not a necessity. So caveat number 1, if you're working for a smaller company or you have a very old school boss that thinks that hand illustration is the standard tool of the trade, then you may be expected to draw by hand, but it's pretty unlikely in 2023 when I'm recording this video. And caveat number 2, if you are running your own small business and hand illustration for you as the designer is the easiest and best way for you to communicate your design intent to the next person in line, which is usually your technical designer, by all means, of course, have at it. It is a beautiful skill. It is kind of a dying skill. But at most major companies, major manufacturers, you're not going to need to use it. So I wouldn't be too worried about it if you're a prospective design student or you're just starting your career in the apparel industry. More than likely, no boss is ever going to ask you to hand draw a single line. Okay, myth number 2, that you have to be able to sew to be a fashion designer. Okay, let's break this one down. So garment construction knowledge is different than being able to perfectly sew a garment yourself. That's because sewing takes practice. That's all it is. The reason that you may buy a commercial garment and it looks, perfectly finished in the cover stitch is because that cover stitch was done by one operator in a production line over and over, day in, day out. So of course they are extremely practiced at it. They are an expert at it, because that's how a major production line runs. Now, you as a person at home with even a very high-end machine, that machine only does so many things. And in factory, there's a lot of sewing aids that you've probably never even seen that they use to help make things more consistent, like an automatic welt pocket machine. It just goes through in one step and it does it. And so it saves you a lot of that effort. So you as a designer at home with your own setup, you're never going to have all of the tools and resources at hand to perfectly construct every step of that garment. And even if you did, you haven't gone through hours and hours and hours of practice every day, honing in each little piece of that skill, each step of operations in making that garment. So you do not have to be able to sew yourself. But yes, you need to know how to put the garment together to be a successful fashion designer. You need to know the terminology, the stitches, the order of operations, but you do not have to be an expert sewer yourself. So again, at the corporate level, you will rarely even find an in-house sample maker. It is rare unless it's a small company or it's a really highly specialized category. And if you do work somewhere that has a sample room, it's almost guaranteed that there is a dedicated sample maker outside of the design team. So it is someone who would maybe report up to tech design that would handle that part of it. So long story short, as long as you go through your classes, you know garment construction, you know the order of operations and all of the vernacular, you're going to be fine. You're never going to be required to sew unless you're trying to get a job as a sample maker or you're trying to work in alterations or bridal or something that is very custom and still, a lot of that work is done in the US. So don't fret if you can't sew. Myth number 3, that all fashion designers are these aloof, stuck-up weirdos. Okay, I'm not going to pretend that we're all as down to earth as the average bear. There can definitely be some strong personalities in the fashion design industry, but there are just as many perfectly humble, lovely, normal human beings in our field as well. So we do get a bad rap, and to be completely fair, sometimes that is deserved, but the best designers know that ego just has no place on a successful team. You have to be able to work with others to bring a collection to market. Otherwise, what's the point? So confidence is super important, but a superiority complex is a really quick way to burn a bridge. And let's be honest, there aren't as many design jobs and apparel companies in the US anymore, so you really can't afford to burn even one bridge. That can be really devastating to your future career. Now, I will say, even in the past decade or so, I have seen a really major shift in the way designers carry themselves and are expected to act and interact with other team members. And I think by large part that is due to more millennials and Gen Z taking up a bigger piece of the pie in the workforce. So I do think some of those historical, I dare say, toxic practices are starting to fade away. And be replaced by people with just kind of new, different values that they're bringing to the craft. So long story short, we're not all stuck up, and even less of us these days are kind of that prototypical snooty designer that we get stereotyped as. So all good movement in our industry. Myth number 4, that there are fast and hard rules to fashion and picking out your outfit. I'll just say this about fashion rules. If they help you get dressed in the morning and they leave you feeling more confident about your choices, have at it. You do you, by all means. However, like any art form, the rules are meant to be bent and broken over time. That's the lifeblood of the industry, is changing and innovating and challenging the norm, right? So no, you don't have to match your belt to your shoes, but if you want to, go for it. And no, your suit coat doesn't have to cover your entire butt. That's the way your dad was told to wear his suit. And true, volume and the oversized boxy look are coming back. But if you have a more trim cut with a shorter jacket that kind of hits you, like I like to say, mid-cheek, you're still going to look really polished and updated and on trend. And yes, you can absolutely wear white after Labor Day. I can't believe we even have to say it, or that people still believe that, but that just goes to show how these sayings can kind of stick with our culture for so long. But if you have any other fashion rules that you'd like to ask my humble opinion about, please put them down in the comments and I'll address them in future videos. I really want to hear what you guys think and what you have heard as you're growing up. You've heard from maybe the older generations in your life. Super curious to hear those and kind of take them on and give you my own sort of opinion about them. So please put those in the comments below. Myth number 5, that we are just putting on fashion shows all the time. We're just always at fashion shows, always looking at things on the runway, and that's what we do. So again, at the corporate level, almost never are you putting on or attending a fashion show for your brand. Now, I'm not talking about designer level brands or any label that presents at the numerous fashion weeks throughout the world. Those obviously exist. at a certain, higher level. But for norms like me at a manufacturer in the United States, it's just not part of our core process. Now, maybe for charity, maybe for PR, once in a blue moon, maybe we'll put our brand on the runway, but that's just not how the mid-tier apparel market sells apparel. Runway shows are just not part of it. At our level, we meet the retail buyers individually, and we present the line through product laydowns, some digital assets, and maybe some mannequins, but runway shows are just really not part of that equation at this level. Okay, last up, myth number 6, that as a fashion designer, you're a de facto expert in every apparel category and every textile ever invented. Just no. I think a lot of disciplines deal with this type of misconception. Because your average human just doesn't know what goes into your profession, no matter what it is. So, in a nutshell, all designers are just professionals working in their little nook of the apparel industry. You get a baseline of knowledge in school around a handful of categories, but there is no standard to which ones you learn about. And until you graduate and work within that specified category in the industry, you're not going to have a functional working knowledge of it. That's just the reality of it. You won't know, the standard fabrics, all of the attributes, the most updated industry vernacular. You might not have even studied menswear or lingerie or children's wear or footwear or technical outdoor or denim in school. So you just can't know everything about every category. And to me, the really fun thing is that you most likely won't spend your whole career just working on one category. You'll most likely move around, and learning a new category and all of the technical terms and the attributes and the different processes is probably the most exciting thing about being a corporate level designer. So embrace it. There's not enough time in school, and you only have, a handful of classes to get this baseline of knowledge. So you really don't know everything until you are in the seat doing the job every day. So I hope you all enjoyed this rundown of common fashion design myths. There's a lot more to cover, so I'm sure this won't be the last episode of Myths and Misconceptions that we do. But for now, please drop any questions into the comments below. Pretty please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.